I came home one Tuesday night and found my husband and his mother rearranging my furniture like I was already dead. The porch light glowed against the dark street, and for a second I thought maybe I had walked into the wrong house. But no, this was mine. Every corner of it had been paid for by me, and yet they were moving things as if I had no place there at all. I'm Rachel Morgan. I'm 35 years old, living in Austin, Texas, and I've worked as a financial auditor for more than a decade. For 14 years, I've paid $1,950 every single month on the mortgage for this house. I did it on my own, without missing a single payment. This place wasn't just where I lived. It was my stability, my proof that all the long nights at the office meant something. That night, I walked inside expecting silence. Maybe the hum of the fridge. Maybe the faint sound of my laptop still charging on the dining table. Instead, I saw Elaine, my mother-in-law, sitting like royalty on my couch, legs tucked neatly under her, cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. She was sipping chamomile tea out of my favorite mug, as if she owned it. Behind her, David stood with his arms crossed, his jaw tight, his eyes sliding away from mine. He didn't greet me. He didn't explain. He just stood there like a guard who had already chosen his side. "Rachel," Elaine said smoothly, turning her head as if she'd been expecting me. "This house belongs to family now, my family." My hands froze on the strap of my work bag. "Excuse me?" She placed the mug down gently, the porcelain clicking against the coaster like a gavel in a courtroom. "David has already handled it. The documents are signed. This home is no longer just yours. It's ours." I whipped my eyes toward my husband. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. He just stared at the floor, as though silence could make him invisible. "What documents?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. Elaine smiled, slow, self-satisfied, the kind of smile people wear when they think they've already won. "The papers transferring the house. David signed them. It's done." My mind raced. Transfer? That wasn't even possible. Not without me. Not legally. Still, I felt the blood drain from my face. And then I saw it. On the coffee table sat a folder. Bright red. Thick. Important looking. The kind banks and title offices use. David shifted quickly, moving his arm over it like he was casually resting his hand. But the motion was too fast, too forced. The room seemed to shrink around me. The walls, the furniture, the years of sacrifice. I could feel them pressing in, reminding me how much I had given, how much I had built. Elaine leaned back, perfectly at ease, as if she'd already claimed victory. My instinct screamed to lunge for that folder, to rip it open and shove the truth in their faces. But something in me held still, because sometimes the smartest move isn't made in fury. Sometimes it's in silence. So I stared at that red folder, memorizing every inch of it. And I swallowed the anger boiling inside me. If they wanted a fight, I would give them one. But it would be on my terms. If you are watching this, drop a comment telling me where you are from. Hit subscribe and stay tuned to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of being the forgotten daughter. The living room felt like enemy territory. Elaine still sat there, with her cardigan pulled tight, her eyes sharp, her lips pressed into the smug curve of someone who believed she had already won. David wouldn't meet my gaze, his arms folded, his stance defensive, but not protective. He wasn't on my side. He was on hers. I set my bag down slowly, letting the silence stretch until it nearly cracked. Then I said, clear and steady, "I've paid over $327,000 in mortgage in 14 years. Every single payment was mine." David scoffed, almost relieved to have something to say. I paid insurance. I paid for repairs. I covered the car expenses. You weren't the only one contributing. My laugh was sharp, humorless. You fixed the water heater once, only because your mother complained the house smelled musty. You bought groceries maybe 4 times last year. And that was when I was stuck working double shifts during tax season. That's not contribution, David. That's an occasional errand. Elaine leaned forward, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. You talk as if this was ever just yours. You were renting space in this family. You overstayed your welcome, Rachel. This house was meant to be shared with us. You acted like a tenant instead of a wife. The words hit like ice water, but I didn't flinch. My eyes stayed locked on hers, daring her to say more. For a moment, silence returned. And then David dropped the line that made my stomach knot. If you fight this, he said flatly, I'll freeze our joint accounts. I'll cut you off from every dollar. You won't survive without me. For a second, I nearly laughed. Our joint accounts? We never had any. Not once in 14 years had David put his name on anything with mine. He had refused to co-sign the mortgage when we bought the house. Claiming debt gave him anxiety. I had carried every payment, every responsibility, every ounce of stability. And yet, I didn't correct him. I didn't spit the truth back in his face. I stayed quiet. It was deliberate, calculated. And maybe that silence was the part people would argue about later. Why didn't I defend myself? Why didn't I crush his empty threat right then and there? Because sometimes the most powerful response isn't shouting down a lie. It's letting the liar believe you swallowed it whole. Elaine smirked, misreading my stillness as defeat. David straightened, like he'd just won a round. But inside, I felt something shift. A reminder. A fact they had both conveniently forgotten. David had never co-signed the mortgage. 14 years ago, he'd pushed the papers back across the desk at the bank and said, "Too much pressure," and I had signed them alone. That red folder on the table suddenly wasn't just a symbol of betrayal. It was leverage, proof, ammunition. I let my eyes flick toward it one last time, before meeting David's stare. He thought he had trapped me. Elaine thought she had dethroned me. But they had both missed the one thing that mattered most. And as that realization took root in me, I promised myself I would not waste it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything across the room the way a younger version of me might have. Instead, I walked upstairs with the kind of calm that only comes when anger has frozen into something sharper. I pulled my old navy blue suitcase from the closet. The zipper was stiff from disuse, dust clinging to the edges. I packed in silence. 3 pairs of jeans, a handful of shirts, my work blazer, the laptop that had practically become an extension of me, toothbrush, phone charger, nothing more. And then, from the back of the closet, I dragged out the cardboard box I hadn't touched in years. The one labeled, simply, house. By the time I wheeled the suitcase back down the stairs, Elaine was rearranging throw pillows like she already owned the place. David stood near the doorway, arms still folded. But he didn't stop me. He didn't even try. "You're really leaving?" he asked, his voice almost soft. "You kicked me out," I replied evenly. Then I walked past them both and stepped into the night. The motel sat off the highway, the kind with a flickering neon sign and curtains that never fully closed. $68 a night bought me peeling wallpaper, a water-stained ceiling, and the faint smell of bleach. But it was quiet. It was mine, if only temporarily. I set my suitcase against the wall and sat on the edge of the bed. The springs creaked under my weight as I opened the cardboard box. Inside, neatly stacked in folders I had labeled myself, were mortgage statements, property tax receipts, maintenance invoices, all bearing one name, mine. 14 years, $1,950 each month, and not a single payment had ever come from David. The house had never belonged to him, not legally, not financially. And Elaine, she was nothing more than a guest I had tolerated. But that wasn't all. Buried beneath the stack of statements was another folder I had almost forgotten. When I pulled it out, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from recognition. The life insurance policy, David's name on the cover, my signature on every payment stub. For years, I had covered those premiums without a second thought, believing it was simply another layer of responsibility a wife carried. Now it felt like leverage. I reached for my phone and scrolled to Carla's number. She'd been my closest friend since college, and now she was a sharp, relentless attorney who thrived on cases like this. When she answered, I didn't waste time. "It's time," I said. My voice was steady. "We'll use both the house and the policy." There was silence on the other end, the kind that told me she was already running through possibilities in her head. Then Carla exhaled slowly. "Rachel, do you remember 3 years ago when David tried to take out a loan under your name?" she asked. My grip on the phone tightened. Of course I remembered. He had filed for $42,000, using my credit, my records. The application was denied, and I had cleaned up the mess quietly, never telling anyone. "Yes," I whispered. "Good," Carla said, "because that's another weapon. He's been sloppy. We can use every piece of this." I stared at the insurance papers in front of me, at the neat rows of mortgage receipts, at the undeniable proof that everything they had tried to take was mine and mine alone. On the other end of the line, Carla's voice dropped, firm and deliberate. "Are you ready for the war you're about to start?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. My silence was enough, because for the first time that night, my anger wasn't just burning. It was focused, and that meant the real fight had only just begun. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. No pounding in my chest, no dread about what waited downstairs. Just clarity. I dressed simply, pulled my hair into a knot, and carried the box of documents to meet Carla. We chose a quiet coffee shop tucked between a laundromat and a florist, the kind of place where no one paid attention to the next table. Carla was already there, dark blazer over a faded band tee, her laptop open, eyes sharp as ever. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Show me everything." I slid the folders across. She flipped through them quickly, her fingers tapping the mortgage receipts, the tax forms, the insurance policy. "This is airtight," she said. "He never co-signed. Every cent came from you. Legally, it's yours." I nodded, but she kept going. "And the insurance? You've been paying premiums for years, right?" "Every month," I said. "He doesn't even know the details." Carla's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Good. If he tries to drag you through court, we use this. It shows you've carried his financial weight, too." Judges like evidence of imbalance. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. For the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a strategist. "And don't forget the loan application," Carla added, her tone sharpening. $42,000 filed under your name without consent. That's attempted fraud. He was lucky it got denied. If we bring it up now, it paints him as reckless, manipulative, and financially unstable. Memories of that mess flashed through me. Hours on the phone, clearing my credit, pretending it never happened. I had buried it, but Carla was right. It was another weapon. "So what's the play?" I asked. Carla leaned forward. "You list the house. Fast. We'll handle the paperwork, make it legal and visible. That way, when he tries to challenge it, the evidence is already in motion. He'll look like a squatter in a property he never owned. I stared down at my coffee, black and bitter. And Elaine, Carla shrugged. She's irrelevant. She has no claim, but her presence complicates him emotionally, which works to your advantage. Let them think they're in control. And then, she snapped her fingers. You pull the rug. A slow grin spread across my face. I pulled out my phone and typed a message, carefully measured. I don't want to fight. Let's meet and settle this. Carla raised an eyebrow. You sure about that wording? That's the point, I said. He needs to believe I'm tired, that I'll compromise. Within minutes, the 3 dots appeared. Then, the reply lit up my screen. Fine. Bring the paper Sunday. Mom will be there too. Carla let out a low whistle. He didn't even hesitate. I locked my phone, sliding it across the table. My reflection in the dark screen looked different somehow. Harder, steadier. This wasn't surrender. This was bait. I stood, gathering the folders, tucking them back into the box. My chair scraped against the floor. Sharp and final. Carla tilted her head. So, I tapped the screen once, watching the message disappear into silence, and whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Perfect. Sunday morning, the air felt heavy, like the sky itself was holding its breath. I drove back to the house I had paid for 14 years. The house they had claimed without shame. The house they thought they had stolen. My heart beat steady, not frantic. I had rehearsed every move. When I walked through the front door, Elaine was already waiting, perched on the couch like a cat guarding territory. David stood near the mantel, chest puffed, as if this was his victory lap. Elaine's smile was sharp. So, you finally learned your place. I set my bag down softly and folded my hands, my voice measured. I don't want this to drag on. Let's make things clear. I pulled a stack of papers from the folder Carla had prepared and slid them across the coffee table toward David. His eyes flickered with triumph. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even skim the lines. He snatched up a pen and signed, his signature scrawled in the bold strokes of someone who believed he had just won everything. Elaine clapped her hands lightly, like a teacher praising a child. There now. That wasn't so hard, was it? I tilted my head, watching the pen lift from the page. Not hard at all. David leaned back, smug, tossing the pen aside. See? This is how it should have been from the start. No more fighting, no more resistance. Finally, we're on the same page. He had no idea how true that last line was, because the paper he had just signed wasn't a transfer of ownership. It wasn't a settlement agreement. It was something much simpler and much more devastating. It was an acknowledgement of non-ownership, a statement that confirmed, in his own handwriting, that he had never been a co-signer, never paid a dime toward the mortgage, never held a legal stake in the property. A confession, disguised as a formality. Carla had drafted it with surgical precision. David's arrogance had done the rest. I gathered the papers calmly, tucking them back into the folder. Thank you, I said, my tone even, almost gentle. Elaine frowned. That's it? You sign too, don't you? I smiled faintly. I don't need to. Confusion flickered across David's face. But before he could open his mouth, I stood, sliding the folder into my bag. Elaine's voice rose, sharp now. Wait, what did he just sign? I met her eyes with a calm that felt like steel. Exactly what he's denied for 14 years. David stepped forward, suddenly uneasy. Rachel, what are you? But I was already walking toward the door, my steps deliberate, unhurried. My fingers curled around the handle, the house buzzing behind me with a silence that felt louder than shouting. Elaine called out, her tone edged with panic. "You can't just walk away." I turned my head slightly, just enough for them to see the curve of my smile. "Watch me." And then I stepped outside, letting the door close behind me with a soft click that echoed like a verdict. Inside, they would be reading, rereading, realizing what David had just given me with his careless pen stroke. The acknowledgement that stripped away every illusion of ownership, every lie they had tried to tell. I didn't need to stay for the explosion. I didn't need to hear Elaine's shrill disbelief or watch David's face fall as he pieced it together. All I needed was the silence of the street, the weight of the folder under my arm, and the steady knowledge that I had just shifted the entire battlefield. I walked to my car, the morning sun breaking through the clouds, and I let myself breathe. Behind me, the house was no longer a trap. It was a weapon. The morning after David signed his own undoing, I sat across from Carla in a bright office with wide glass windows. A real estate broker, one of her trusted contacts, joined us, a stack of listing forms already spread out on the polished oak table. "This is going to move fast," the broker said, flipping through comps of recent sales. "Inventory is tight. Demand is high. With your documentation, there won't be any delays." I nodded, sliding the folder across. Inside was everything. Mortgage receipts, title deed, David's fresh acknowledgement of non-ownership. Carla tapped that page lightly with her pen. "This is gold." He handed you the keys without realizing it. By noon, the listing was live. Professional photos hit the website, showing every angle of the house they thought was theirs. By evening, offers began to trickle in, and by the next morning, the first serious buyer appeared with an offer that made me inhale sharply. $562,000. I sat at Carla's desk, staring at the number on the printed sheet. 14 years of checks, sacrifice, skipped vacations, and here it was, crystallized into a sum that was finally mine. That was when the first call came. David. His voice was frantic, words tumbling too fast. "Rachel, what the hell are you doing? You can't sell the house. You can't just... This is our home." I leaned back in the chair, letting his panic wash over me. Then I answered evenly. "I already did. And it's legal." Silence. Then a sharp inhale on his end, like the sound of a balloon deflating. No, you can't." But I ended the call before he could finish. Carla looked at me, one brow raised. "Ready for the second strike?" I exhaled. "Do it." She slid another folder across. This one contained records of every premium I had paid for David's life insurance policy. For years, I had carried it as one more invisible burden. Now, it was ammunition. Carla had already drafted a complaint demanding reimbursement for those payments, framing it as unjust enrichment, money I had funneled into his security while he betrayed mine. When the paperwork was filed, Carla leaned back, satisfied. "He's about to learn that debts don't vanish just because you pretend they don't exist." My phone buzzed again. David. Again. I ignored it. A text appeared seconds later. "You'll regret this. Mom says you're vindictive. You're tearing this family apart." Family. The word tasted bitter. For years, I had been the one paying to hold that family together. Now they called me vindictive for refusing to bankroll their entitlement. The phone rang once more. This time, the caller ID read, Elaine. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice came shrieking through the speaker, full of rage and panic. "You destroyed my son's future. Do you understand what you've done? He'll have nothing. Nothing." I held the phone away from my ear, staring out the office window at the clear Texas sky. When she finally paused for breath, I brought the phone back, my voice cool and steady. Then maybe he should have built something of his own. And before she could unleash another tirade, I pressed the red button and ended the call. The silence that followed felt like armor. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to their chaos. I was orchestrating it. The sale went through faster than even I expected. 1 week of showings, 3 solid offers, and by Friday afternoon, the papers were signed. The wire transfer hit my account before the ink was dry. I opened a brand new account in my name alone. No shared access, no hidden obligations. Watching the numbers appear on the screen felt surreal. 14 years of checks, of cutting corners, of saying no to myself so the mortgage never missed a beat. Finally, all of it had come back to me. David, on the other hand, had nothing. The acknowledgement of non-ownership he'd signed left him without a claim to a single dollar. The life insurance policy I had carried for him was canceled. Premiums clawed back through Carla's complaint. And then there was the loan, $42,000 he had tried to sneak under my name. Carla had flagged it in her filings, forcing the bank to review it. That stain followed him like smoke. Elaine fared no better. The antiques she had once bragged about, the priceless china, the clocks she claimed were heirlooms, ended up scattered across flea markets and online listings. I even spotted one of her gilded lamps in a photo on Facebook Marketplace. She sold it all for pennies, just to scrape together enough for a ground-floor apartment in a crumbling complex on the edge of Houston. The woman who once sipped tea from my favorite mug now lived in a place where the faucets leaked rust and the neighbors left trash bags in the hallway. David spiraled with her. The younger woman he had paraded around behind my back disappeared the moment she realized he no longer had a house, a car, or even a stable bank account. She ghosted him, blocked his number, left him in the wreckage he had created. But the worst was still waiting. Because David's career was built on appearances. He floated from contract to contract, living off short-term roles, padding his resume with half-truths. And in that floating, he'd gotten sloppy. For years, I had noticed inconsistencies in his filings, deductions that didn't add up, credits claimed twice. I kept copies, tucked away, never knowing when I might need them. The day after the house sold, I packaged them into a neat envelope and mailed them anonymously to his employer's compliance department. Receipts, statements, and a simple note. Review closely. Weeks later, as I sat in my new condo, my laptop open on the kitchen table, the email arrived. The subject line read, "Investigation confirmed." I clicked. "Thank you for your cooperation. Your submission aided our internal review. Corrective action is underway." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the words, "corrective action." I didn't know if that meant termination, blacklisting, or something worse. But I knew it meant accountability. David had always believed I wouldn't fight back, that I would carry his weight forever while he strutted on borrowed ground. Elaine had believed she could shame me out of my own home and call it justice. Now he had no job security. She had no antiques. Together they had no house. And I had everything I needed. The money from the sale cleared in less than a month. And just like that, the house was no longer mine. Not because they had taken it from me, but because I had chosen to let it go on my own terms. I didn't buy another house right away. Instead, I rented a furnished condo near the lake. It was smaller than the old place, quieter too, but it felt like oxygen. White curtains that billowed in the morning breeze, sunlight spilling across hardwood floors, and the sound of water lapping against the shore, instead of Elaine's criticisms or David's sulking footsteps. For the first time in years, I had no one rearranging my furniture, no one second-guessing how I loaded the dishwasher. No one telling me how to spend my money. I watered the plants when I wanted to, ordered sushi when I didn't feel like cooking, and stayed up late reading without worrying if someone was going to slam the bedroom door. I didn't rush into grand plans. I didn't reinvent myself overnight. Instead, I allowed myself to breathe, to be still, to sleep without nightmares of unpaid bills or surprise accusations. Weeks passed like that, simple and steady. Then one evening, at a networking event Carla insisted I attend, I ran into Brad, an old acquaintance from the industry. He introduced me to a colleague of his, Andrew, an architect recently back from a project overseas. Andrew wasn't flashy. His handshake was firm but warm, his laugh unforced, his stories more about botched airline meals than bragging about achievements. When he learned I worked in finance, he didn't ask me to fix his taxes or peek at his QuickBooks. Instead, he asked, "What part of your job do you actually enjoy?" No one had ever asked me that before. I surprised myself with the answer. The order of it. Numbers don't lie. They don't play favorites. They just tell the truth. He smiled. That's how I feel about structures. Steel beams don't fake their strength. They either hold or they don't. For the first time in a long time, I felt something like possibility. Not dependency, not obligation. Just two people talking, seeing each other clearly. Later that night, as I walked back to my condo, my phone buzzed. It was a message from David. "I'm sorry. I should have appreciated you. I didn't realize how much you carried." I stared at it for a long moment. The old me might have drafted a reply, tried to explain the weight he never noticed, the sacrifices he never respected. But the new me only typed one sentence. "You didn't realize because you never tried." Then I deleted the thread, not out of spite, but out of peace, because closure doesn't come when someone finally apologizes. It comes when their words no longer carry power. In the weeks that followed, I sorted through the last remnants of my old life, the folders of receipts, the photos of David with that younger woman, the notes I had once planned to use in court. One evening, I fed them into my shredder, page by page, until nothing but ribbons of paper remained. Not because I wanted to forget. Forgetting was impossible, but because I no longer needed the proof. I knew what I had survived. More importantly, I knew who I had become. Elaine and David faded into the background like characters from a play that had already closed. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their rental was falling apart, that David was struggling to find work, that Elaine had pawned even her wedding china. None of it stirred me. Their collapse wasn't my victory. It was simply the consequence of their choices. My victory was freedom. One Saturday, Andrew and I sat on a bench by the lake, watching boats drift in the distance. He asked me a question no one had ever asked before. "What's the one thing you wish people understood about you?" I thought for a long time before answering. That I don't forgive easily, but when I do, I never forget. I just stop carrying it. He nodded. "Is that the same as closure?" I smiled faintly. It's better. That night, lying in my quiet condo, I realized I had stopped bracing for the next betrayal. I wasn't waiting for the rug to be pulled out from under me. I was standing on solid ground. I had built myself. And maybe that was the greatest revenge of all. Because in the end, this wasn't about punishing David or humiliating Elaine. It was about reclaiming my life, my choices, my peace. The house had been bricks and walls, in memories, some good, many bitter. Letting it go wasn't weakness. It was liberation. The lesson I carried forward was simple. Control isn't about holding on tighter. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is let go, walk away, and start again on your own terms. And maybe, just maybe, leave space for something better to find you. Would you have sold the house like I did? Or would you have stayed to fight them inside those walls?